No decisions were going to be made. I just needed to listen. And my whole goal was to learn who I am and try to get to know her better and love her. And I still feel goofy saying that to people, but I say it because I know somebody else needs to hear that I was not there. I didn't love myself. I tried to do it without judgment, Joanna. When I read something, I would just go, that spoke to me, and I would write it down. And if I'm not, again, I'm trying to be a meditator, but if I meditated and a very strong feeling came over me, I would write it down. And so the only thing that I committed to was writing down if something affected me, because again, I was trying to get to know myself. So writing it down, and it was only for me. And now anybody who's listened to my podcast knows I say it over and over again. Journaling is only for you. It's a note to your future self. So then what happened at the end of this listening journey is that I went back into that journal and I was shocked. There was so much information in there and so much of me. Like, why did that speak to me? That somebody else could read that same book and not get the same message out of it. I could probably read that book again and not get the same message out of it. Just allowing that whatever came out was okay. And there was no word count. There was no, I have to write 5 pages. Some days it could have just been, today was a rough day, but I loved this, or I saw a rainbow. It didn't matter. There was no judgment. I was not a journaler. I think it's really important to share that with people, because if you had told me I had to journal, I probably wouldn't have done it. It really just was where I was at that point in time. I needed to get to know myself better, and that was the method that I used.
Welcome to the Voices of OUTCAN podcast. Join Military Family Services US as we explore the experiences our Canadian Armed Forces families have while on OUTCAN. Leaving your home to live in another country can be an exciting adventure, but it is also a time filled with unexpected challenges. Get a glimpse into the CAF OUTCAN world with these unique stories of resiliency and courage. Share in their struggles and cheer for their triumphs. Here are the voices of our OUTCAN families. Welcome to another episode of the Voices of OUTCAN podcast, where we share the stories of our Canadian Armed Forces families who have been on an Out of Canada or OUTCAN posting. I am your host for today's episode, Joanna Church. February is the month where many of our OUTCAN families are beginning their preparation to head back to Canada after a several-year posting to the United States. This past year, there were many families who had been expecting to head home and were getting prepared with all of the things that you need to think about when anticipating an international move. And then COVID hit. And suddenly, many of them were being asked to extend their posting for another year, which meant scrambling to get visas extended and employment authorizations extended and driver's license extended. Rental agreements had to be amended, and many other challenges, on top of dealing with all of the restrictions and new protocols that COVID brought to our day-to-day living. Today's guest, Bona Normandeau, is both a military spouse and a Navy reservist who has spent the last 4.5 years in the Washington, D.C. area. And we're bringing her on to share her story of life OUTCAN, both before COVID and during COVID, and what it means to her and her family to be heading back to Canada this summer. Bona, welcome to the Voices of OUTCAN podcast. Thanks for joining us today to share your voice.
Thanks for inviting me, Joanna. It's exciting to be here.
It's exciting to have you here. Bona, as we were getting ready to talk today, you shared something that stood out to me right away. You called your little family of you, your husband Norm, and your son Alex, Team Normandeau. And your life mantra is, as long as we are together, we can handle anything. Tell me about how that has gotten you through not just the last 5 years of OUTCAN, but for your 24 years together being a military couple.
So I think when you deploy and part of the family's left at home and part of the family goes away, you really start to realize that you can't do it on your own. And so I think we've always had that mindset for my husband and I, is that we're a team and we need to talk everything through and we'll get there together. And throughout the years, we've had different situations, even in travel where, where everything goes wrong. And we'll just sit there and say, oh, thank goodness we're together. And we're not trying to get a hold of the other one to say, this is where I'm at. And so we have always worked as a team, but it was just a friend a few years ago who said, how's Team Normandeau? And we just held on to that and thought, yes, we can basically make it through any struggle, any challenge, as long as we work together and think as a team. That's pretty much been our mantra for a few years now.
And how do you incorporate your son into that? Because as we know, military kids have a lot of challenges, a lot of upheaval, moving to new schools. And how do you bring him into Team Normandeau?
Well, actually, it's interesting because he is an only child. I think the Team Normandeau part of it is even more important because we only have him. And so we're not bringing a best friend with us every time we yank him from school to school. There's been a couple of moves where we try to bring him into the thought process or the acceptance and the preparation mentally. So, for example, the posting coming down here, my husband and I were over the moon excited about it, but we needed to pitch it to him and just say, okay, 2 out of the 3 out of the team really want to do this. How can we get you on board and excited about it and things like that? So there was a little bit of negotiation. So anybody who's met my son can tell you he's quite the negotiator because he's realized he's got to say on the team.
I think that's important. I think a lot of people don't consider their kids in some of the choices that they make. And the fact that you're not just considering him, but giving him a voice in the process is pretty cool. I mean, even if at the end of the day you have to override him, right? And say, well, this is where we have to go because this is where the military is sending us. The fact that you just include him in the conversation is probably really important to him.
Well, and we did have to learn that to explain we'd like his opinion, we'd like his input, but we're the adults and Papa works for the military. So as much as we can come up with a plan, ultimately, sometimes we have to do what we have to do.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, I like it. I like Team Normandeau. I think that's really cool. And for people listening, maybe that's something that you can incorporate into your family life as well, is call yourself a team and then live it out every day. Bona, if you could, what 3 words would you use to describe your family's OUTCAN experience for the 3 years leading up to COVID last year?
Travel, adventure, and fun. We've just had an amazing time while we're down here.
For the travel, what was your favorite travel experience in the U.S.?
That is so tough. We loved all of our travel, whether it's close to around where we live or across the country. So just choosing one, I can't do. So I will say Arizona and the Grand Canyon were 2 of, I think, the biggest eye openers for me of things that I'd never seen anything like that before.
Tell me about it. Describe the Grand Canyon experience for us.
It was so amazing. And we didn't get the best weather while we were there. One day we were in toques and gloves and big jackets and stuff. And then the next day there was sunshine, but it is just awe-inspiring and nothing that pictures can do justice. And I see pictures of it now and it can take me right back there. But I think I had seen pictures of the Grand Canyon before, but once you've actually seen there and experienced the awe that you feel just looking at it, it's incredible. And then I always tell people you absolutely have to take, it doesn't have to be a long one, but you have to hike down into the canyon because that again is just a whole different perspective and amazing and awe-inspiring. Yeah, just incredible.
Oh, it sounds amazing. I am jealous of you. I've always wanted to go. I'm from the States, as you know, and it's one of the places that I've never been, but it's on that list. And I'm looking forward to the day when I can hike down into the very bottom and then cross over and hike up the next side. But I've heard that's quite an adventure and takes a lot of training. So I'm not ready yet.
That would be amazing though. It is absolutely, I think it should be on everybody's bucket list. Well, not a should, I don't ever want to should people, but it is, I recommend it to everybody when they ask. I'm like, absolutely, hands down. Yeah.
Boy, those 3 words, not everybody would say that those 3 words describe their OUTCAN experience, the adventure, the travel. Did you guys make it a purposeful thing that when you went on your OUTCAN, like, did you have a plan that we're gonna make this a grand adventure, or how did you approach
That
that?
was literally the conversation of Team Normandeau on the drive down here was this is our adventure posting. And so our son was grade 4 when we moved down here. So pretty easy to be flexible with schooling. So we weren't too worried about maybe missing a few things at school. I probably shouldn't say that publicly. But so we just said, this is our adventure posting. And so we were going to see as much of the United States as we could. But then also my husband's posting was into a NATO project, and we knew there was going to be a lot of travel with his position. And so we came down here with the full thought process that as much as Alex and I could join him on any of those trips, we were going to see the world. Literally, no grass has grown underneath us. We've just been pretty much on the go until last year.
And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, how that changed everything. A lot of people, as I was saying, don't have the same experience. When they go on OUTCAN, the 3 words that they would use to describe their experience would be maybe isolating, lonely. There's just different experiences that we have depending on where we get posted and the community we get posted into. So I know that a lot of people feel very isolated when they first move to a new community as adults in general, but even more so when moving to a new country. Again, you were very intentional about finding ways to make connections and friendships with other Canadian military families in your area, but also with U.S. and international spouses as well. I would love to know, and I'm sure people listening who maybe are struggling with feeling isolated, they would love to know, how did you intentionally and purposely seek out and then build those relationships?
Well, this is going to end up being a shout out to the MFS US actually, because when we first got here, there was an event that we went to and met other Canadian families. And literally, I remember Brenda Dunn's family drove up. They had just arrived that day. Immediately, we met Canadians. And then the coordinator had a coffee date with moms and kids. And I started working at the embassy. My husband was out of town with work and our son was at school. And I got a flat tire on the middle of the Washington Parkway.
Oh.
At that point, we were less than a month into this posting.
So just a second, I'm going to interrupt you here. For those people who don't understand, when you say the Washington Parkway, can you just describe what the Washington Parkway is like to drive on?
I mean, rush hour, it's just full. And in fact, when I called for help, the people said, well, I can't help you. You're on the parkway. It's too dangerous. I can't come and get you. And I had to convince this young guy that, no, you can. There is literally a pullover. I think it's the only one on the whole parkway because there's no shoulder. It's just 2 lanes each way. And it's basically chalkers at rush hours. Yeah. And so because I wasn't in danger and I told them I'd pulled off the road and I was safe, I was stuck there for 2 hours. And like I said, my husband was out of town. I'm stuck there. There literally is nothing I can do. And so at that MFS, those 2 events, I had made connections and I knew that I was going to need community around me. And so I took people's phone numbers. I even took pictures of them. So, so I knew who I was calling when I,
That's
when
a
I
first.
called
That's
them.
the first I've ever heard that.
Yeah, a lot of them weren't comfortable with that when I did it, but I'm like, no, you can take mine too. It's okay. I said, but honestly, like I've just met 10 people here today and I need to remember which one is my friend Heather. Anyway, so I knew Heather she was the closest Canadian to me. We'd connected and I called her and I said, I don't know if you can help me at all, but Alex has met you and I think he would be okay, but I need somebody to pick him up from school because I am literally stuck here until somebody comes and helps me. And she ran and got him and then managed to get her kids in time. And she had him for a couple of hours for me because I had no other support system. I hadn't met my neighbors yet. The school didn't really know me because I had taken the contract at the embassy. So I wasn't involved. And it was, I think, the 10th day of school or something like that. Like it was, we didn't know anybody.
So that could have been scary for him too.
And that was it. And so I asked them to let me talk to him and I explained who was coming and then he just had to be in the office for a few minutes. But yeah, it was holy, what a way to start a posting. But what it made me realize was how important it was to have a community around you. I'll be honest, my attitude the first year, I had these Canadians, so I wasn't as perhaps as outgoing in my neighborhood as I could have been. And then I realized, hold on, I'm wasting my time down here. I need to get to know my neighborhood and those people around me. And so then I did absolutely become more intentional about it. And I put myself out there. One of the things I felt like I was really missing out on was the military spouses from the US. So one of my friends had joined a military spouses club, and she said, you should come to one of our get-togethers and gatherings. And I did, and it was a lot of fun, but I very quickly realized that it was just kind of surface contact, and you met nice people, but there was not a lot of switching of phone numbers. Nobody was going to let me take their picture and their phone number.
I wonder why.
I know, right? Right, exactly. I joined the executive board because I realized very quickly that they created this team. And I thought, as an international spouse, I really wanted to get in and make the connections to our American counterparts. I'm so glad I did that. I almost wish I'd done it sooner, but I don't believe in regrets. So, and then the international community, because my husband was in a NATO posting, again, being a native English speaker there, I felt it was even more important that I got involved to help out some of these other ladies who were coming with children, and English was their fourth or fifth language. And so to be able to say, here's what I found worked, because I didn't have that extra language barrier. All three groups just created just this, like I said, this incredible experience for us. And we've had so much fun and so many unique experiences that I don't think we could recreate anywhere else.
I think a lot of times when a military spouse finds themselves on an OUTCAN posting, whether that's in the United States or overseas somewhere, they wonder how they're going to be accepted by the spouses of the other countries. So how did you find that? Did you find that they had opened their arms to you, that they felt that your experience was just as valid as a Canadian military spouse, as a US military spouse is? Just what was your experience like in terms of being accepted into that military spouse group?
I think hands down, a military spouse is a military spouse. And so there was absolutely no delineation between what country you were from. In fact, what was fascinating was comparing, they do what to you? Like just the whole, oh, like, no, like, we think sometimes we're hard done by, or it's really difficult. And then you hear what another country has done and how they're dealing with this move. It makes you grateful for all the things that you do have. I think it's just being a military spouse, what my experience has been, that it bonds us no matter what country we're from.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. We like to say that when we are on OUTCAN, we're all like mini unofficial ambassadors to the country that we're living in. And you had mentioned to me that as a family, you think that you have now become more Canadian than you have ever been, and that you have made it your family mission to introduce as many people to Canadian influences and culture and references as you can. So tell me a little bit about that.
I do believe we're more Canadian because it's part of identifying and realizing that we are different, and particularly with our American friends, because if we walked into a group, you wouldn't know I was Canadian in an American group. I look like those around me. But the difference is cultural and just the way we talk. They like to poke fun at us. But really, it's been fun to realize that, like I said, I grew up with Nanaimo bars at every church function, right? Like every church potluck had Nanaimo bars. I didn't realize that was Canadian. I'm like, what? You didn't grow up with it? Oh, you're missing out. And then we were at my son's baseball game once, and I said, hey, Mike, I like your toque. And he just looked at me like I was speaking a whole other language. Well, apparently I was, because
Yeah.
you know this, Joanna, right?
Yeah.
You guys say hat or beanie. And I said, well, no, a hat's a hat and a beanie's a beanie. That's a toque. And then, of course, because we have all the international friends, and so many discussions are, what's your Christmas tradition or what's your Thanksgiving tradition? And so just realizing what makes me Canadian, I took for granted, or I didn't realize I'd never really been put in a situation to analyze it this much and for this long. It's fun. So then, yes, I am absolutely on a mission to get as many people to say toque as I can. Yeah.
Try ketchup chips, eat Nanaimo bars, and drink moose milk.
There you go. Moose milk. Very important. Yes. Yep.
Why does it all revolve around food? Lots of
Oh,
Canadian
wow.
food.
Yeah. And it is the Normandeaus. We are motivated by food for sure. Yeah.
I know a lot of our families are concerned that when they go on OUTCAN, especially if their OUTCAN does extend 4 or 5, some of them 6 years, they're concerned that their kids aren't being raised in their Canadian culture. Is there something that you did with your husband intentionally with your son to keep the Canadian culture alive and in front of him and a part of who he is, so that when he's at school and being his little mini ambassador self, that he can really fully be who he is as a Canadian while he's in this US system?
Well, so my husband's French Canadian, so we try to keep as much French around the house as we can. And right there, that makes him different, right? Like he realizes
Yeah.
that he has those two languages as opposed to, Spanish, which is more popular down here for sure. I think we told more stories. We tried to compare things to maybe what we'd seen in Canada and go, Canada doesn't have anything like the Grand Canyon. Like you need to soak this up because this is incredible. And just different things like that. And same thing, Arizona, the cacti. We don't have this in Canada, those kind of things. So just kind of discussing and then helping him realize when he's learning American history that when they're talking about the British, that's actually the Commonwealth. And so getting him to realize sometimes when they say us and them, we're the them, sort of,
So true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And we've kind of jokingly said, don't worry, buddy, we will catch you up on Canadian history. We've got Canadian History for Dummies. It's an 8.5 hour drive when we move back home. So you'll just read that book on the way home.
There you go. Just what that young mind wants to hear. Oh,
Totally.
great.
Yeah.
12 hours of reading a book.
Don't forget to check out calfconnection.ca to find information and resources for members and their families specific to your location. Whether that's across Canada or at any OUTCAN post, Military Family Services is here for you, regardless of your posted location.
So I asked you to use 3 words to describe your OUTCAN experience pre-COVID. Can you now share with me 3 words that you would say apply to your family's life this past year during COVID?
Yeah, that one's not as exciting. But what I will say is I think the words would be quiet, simple, and grateful. Team Normandeau had to turn in on itself. And I work from home. And so, the day that we realized that all 3 of us were going to be working from home, not realizing it would still be there 11 months later, we had a team meeting about how this was going to happen because this is going to be so different than anything we've ever done before. And what came out of this whole experience for us is we still like each other. The team aspect of it is even more important now because we're always in each other's space. We don't get a break from each other in this environment. So our son he's been virtual schooling without a choice since March 16th of last year. We have a very quiet life. We have a very simple life. All activities are taken away. All exterior activities are taken away. But I think the most important, Joanna, for us is we are so grateful because we truly believe that as long as we're together, we can get through anything. And so that's what we did is we just figured out how we needed to work together to do this. We completely simplified our life, but gratitude is the biggest thing that's come out of this year for us because we just feel so blessed that we've always felt safe. We've got to go through this together. And yeah, there's some real bummers about the past year, but ultimately the 3 of us and our families are healthy and we've kept in touch and we're safe. So
Yeah. Is there one thing that you can say to us that you did as a family this past year that was sort of new and unique because of this situation?
Oh yeah, we started small traditions. A few months into this, we realized that we have this rolling 12-month calendar. And I told you for us, this whole posting for us was about travel and adventure and fun. And we had this rolling 12-month calendar and we kept all our trips in there and when the grandparents were coming to visit, and that was all in there, different color coded. And it was like our exciting look forward anticipation. And then boom, that got completely wiped clean. And we thought, well, that's all gone. That's all gone. And what we realized is life's a little rough when you take away anticipation and fun. And so we came up with some new habits and some new things that went on the books just to make things more exciting. We started with something as goofy as chip night on the days that my son wasn't allowed any video games. He's like, well, what am I going to look forward to? So we're like, okay, well, that's chip night. And as much as we could, we found our all dressed chips. It's apparently Canada's favorite flavor down here. That's the marketing they use. 2 other things, such as, the summer obviously didn't have the big trip, camping trip back home or anything like that. So we just discovered our local area and added in things that all 3 of us could get excited about. We just found ways to put anticipation and excitement back into our lives, but was way more local, not far from home.
Yeah. That's a cool idea and just a really great attitude. I think everybody sort of found themselves in that space this past year of broken dreams and broken hopes of we had plans and we had things we wanted to do. And I love how you were able to take that and turn it around and still find ways to do that fun stuff together. I think it's sort of funny that you listed dealing with Department of Motor Vehicles each year to get your driver's license was one of your biggest challenges on OUTCAN. And I love it because I know this is going to sound funny to some of our listeners, but dealing with DMVs in some states has actually been listed by our families as one of the top stressors and challenges they face during OUTCAN, right up there with healthcare and children's education. So the fact that you mentioned that when I asked what of your biggest challenges have been, and that's one of them, is just sort of par for the course for our OUTCAN families. Can you just describe what the DMV situation was like for you?
It literally became a joke in our family because we had to, for some reason, and not everybody has this experience, but for some reason they made us go back every year. And every year you get treated like a delinquent and you don't belong and you just don't fit in the system. And so we just made a joke out of it. It was like, okay, how long is it going to take this year? And we would literally have to book a whole day. The first year, it took me 2 whole days to get my my driver's license. But once we figured it out, we're like, okay, you just have to allot a day to it. But then we got an extension, and that's when I realized what it must feel like to just really not be welcome and not belong. And it was not a fun experience. And that one was multiple days and multiple phone calls and multiple frustrations. And so the funny thing was, is we got an extension from 2018 to 2019. And then the joke was, okay, we got it. Thank goodness we never have to deal with the Virginia DMV again. And then COVID happened and we got another extension, and it just became a running joke. And it got so bad, Joanna, that literally my husband and I, we didn't have a driver's license. So if you're American and there's this little screw up and stuff, they'll gap you, because nobody on our son's baseball team could believe that they just wouldn't extend us a couple months until all the paperwork went through, right? We'd been here for 3-4 years, kind of thing. Luckily, we managed to offset it so that one of us was the taxi driver for 10 to 15 days while we were waiting for the other person's approval to come in. Like I said, we had to make a joke out of it because it really was, it's one of the most, it just doesn't make sense that they make it that difficult.
Yeah. Well, and just on top of everything else, especially this past year. So you're already dealing with the challenges that come with extending. As I said at the beginning, you're having to deal with visas and you're having to deal with employment authorization documents and all of these things, which then impact whether or not you can get your driver's license. And so then on top of that, you've got COVID. It's one of those things where it's like the extra stressor. And it's taking days and just the frustration. Yeah, you are in good company with all of the other Canadian families across the United States who this past year were like, we can't stand the DMV. There's a reason why they make jokes about the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Well, that one movie, right, where it's the sloth, and that's it. Like, you're like, oh my gosh, I totally get this reference now. Yes, yes.
Well, for our listeners, one of the coolest things about Bona is that right smack dab in the middle of this worldwide fear and loss and isolation and craziness, she launched the Happier You podcast, where she takes you along on her journey of becoming a happier you. Bona, a few weeks ago, I got to hear you share that not so long ago, you were sitting with some other ladies listening to a speaker, asking everyone to share their dreams and their desires. And what you said happened to you in that moment really touched me in my core, because I think it embodied what so many military spouses feel. Can you share that moment with me and how it started you down the path to creating the Happier You podcast?
Yeah, I was at the conference and the speaker said, what is the dream in your heart? And everybody else seemed to have an answer. And I felt gutted and empty. And there was just this huge void in me because I didn't have an answer, and I couldn't fake an answer. And so I left that conference and I decided I have to fix this. This feels wrong. And so I just went inside and said, I need to learn to love myself. As crazy as that sounds, I need to figure out who I am right now in my 40s and just like me. Start with liking me. I went on this journey of just listening and figuring out who I am and what do I like. And the answer ended up coming through in the podcast. And I need to figure out what my happy is. And so I decided that if I was feeling this, I didn't think I was alone. I have a lot of friends. I'm very social. And I found that there's a lot of us who are just like, we're between chapters in our life and there's kind of this lull and we don't know what's next. And I thought, if I'm going to go on this journey, why don't I take people with me, and just whoever might need to hear this message, I can share my vulnerability and my experience and hopefully motivate others to find theirs as well. Ultimately, I think that is what got us through COVID. And interestingly enough, I literally launched the podcast. It was delayed 2 weeks because COVID we were all in shock. The world was in shock, but I had meant to launch the podcast March 16th, 2020. And it got delayed, but only after a friend said to me, okay, well, yes, COVID's here. It sucks. Get over yourself and launch the podcast. I did. And ultimately what it did is it changed the whole focus of our family. In the beginning, every week we were putting out a podcast. And so the discussions on all of our walks were, what's the next podcast? What are we going through? What do we need to figure out? And then around the dinner table. And so Team Normandeau really kicked in and just supported me on this and just helped us focus on what do we have in our lives and what can we change to feel better about this experience. I know that it's touched other people, but the incredible part for me is I literally have found my happier despite all the stressors and challenges of this past year. And I've managed to hold on to hope and excitement for the future. Again, who knows what this posting season is going to look like for all of us. But again, as long as Team Normandeau's together, we can figure out anything.
Bona, why do you think it is that so many military spouses struggle with that moment that you had, that moment of looking inside and realizing, I don't have a dream anymore. I don't know what my dream is. I don't even know who I am anymore. What do you think that is about our military experience that sort of puts us into that place?
I think that we almost feel like we're not allowed to, in the sense that, or if we do, and I listened to one of your podcast guests previously, and that's exactly it. Every time she made a plan, the military posted them. And I think after a while, we just get to the point where it feels hopeless to make plans because we're not in charge. I think that's why this resonates with so many of us, is because we need to figure out how to be happy despite our situation. And we often, the spouses, are the supporters. We support the family. Like in every posting, our spouse has a job and they have instant contact and connections and people to answer questions. We support our kids who then go to school and start making friends and meet the teacher. But nobody puts us into a specific situation. Like we are standing on the playground feeling awkward, or at the social event feeling awkward. And we have to dig deep and stick our hand out first and say, hi, I'm new. I think it's that we are always forced to be the supporter, and we spend so much time prepping everybody else for a successful integration into the new posting that by the time we turn around and get to us, we're prepping for the next move. And so I think after so many years of this, that we just forget to take care of ourselves and ask ourselves as well.
Yeah. Asking ourselves, what can I do in the middle of all of this for me?
And what do I need, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do I need in this move? Because I think we forget to ask.
One of the things that I love as I've gotten to know you and I've been hearing you share your story is how many of your friendships impacted your ability to move forward and encouraged you to keep going. And as you said, you were thinking about not launching, but you had a friend say, nope, get out there, do it. I just feel like as a military spouse, surrounding ourselves with those kinds of people, even if it's far away, even if we surround ourselves with them via Zoom, having those people in our lives who encourage us, who support us, who say, we're going to be with you on this journey to discover who you are, and we're going to help push you along that road is so important. And would you say that I'm reading that right in our discussions, that your friendships and your support system have been that for you?
Absolutely. And I think also, with today's technology, that we get to keep our friends. I mean, we've always kept our friends, but I think nowadays I've realized that in a new posting, we're still texting back to the last posting as we need support as we're going through this transition, right? And so with technology and with the slowing down of COVID, I find it's becoming more natural to reach out to further distances to those friends that maybe are from 2 or 3 postings ago or from your childhood, right? I feel very blessed for all the friends that I have. And it's kind of cool that it doesn't matter where they are in the world. When you need them, they're there for you.
Yeah. If someone was sitting across from you right now and they were looking at you and saying what you said that day, and they said, Bona, I don't have a dream. I don't even know what I'm here for. I don't know what I even like to do anymore. What would you say to them? What would be your next thing that you would say to them? What would be the first step that you would take in encouraging them to do something different or to move forward?
First of all, I think it's okay. You're not alone. I think that's huge to know that you're not the only person who feels this gap. And then, believe it or not, it's listen, but it's listen to yourself and just trust yourself. And I know for me, journaling worked and reading and listening, but then journaling. And so, really just trust that she's in there, that incredible person. You just need to get to know her. Take the time for her and trust that she'll come out, she'll be ready, and she'll show herself to you.
Tell me how you did that with journaling. What was that experience like? Because, journaling for some people might be like, I just write down what I did today. But it sounds like you took it a little deeper. What was your journaling experience like?
Well, let's be very clear. I was not a journaler. I never said I have to do this every day. When I came home from that conference, I told myself, just listen. And I told myself 4 months, no judgment, no decisions were going to be made. I just needed to listen. And my whole goal was to learn who I am and try to get to know her better and love her. And I still feel goofy saying that to people, but I say it because I know somebody else needs to hear that I was not there. I didn't love myself. I tried to do it without judgment, Joanna. When I read something, I would just go, that spoke to me, and I would write it down. And if I'm not, again, I'm trying to be a meditator, but if I meditated and a very strong feeling came over me, I would write it down. And so the only thing that I committed to was writing down if something affected me, because again, I was trying to get to know myself. So writing it down, and it was only for me. And now anybody who's listened to my podcast knows I say it over and over again. Journaling is only for you. It's a note to your future self. So then what happened at the end of this listening journey is that I went back into that journal and I was shocked. There was so much information in there and so much of me. Like, why did that speak to me? That somebody else could read that same book and not get the same message out of it. I could probably read that book again and not get the same message out of it. Just allowing that whatever came out was okay. And there was no word count. There was no, I have to write 5 pages. Some days it could have just been, today was a rough day, but I loved this, or I saw a rainbow. It didn't matter. There was no judgment. I was not a journaler. I think it's really important to share that with people, because if you had told me I had to journal, I probably wouldn't have done it. It really just was where I was at that point in time. I needed to get to know myself better. And that was the method that I used.
I love it. I love how you explain that, because it is, some people think, well, I'm not a writer. I don't know what to write, or why would I want to write what I'm doing during the day? But exactly how you explain that, just writing down, I felt something. What did I feel? Or that phrase impacted me. I'm going to write that down because something about that was speaking to me and I need to think about that a little bit more. I think that's an awesome way of explaining it. That's beautiful. And you can tell that it had an impact on you by doing it. And just even hearing you talk, people can't see Bona right now. I get to see her while she's talking, but I can actually see, as she was sharing that, the emotion on her face as she shared that journey that she was on. So that's really powerful. You sort of touched on it, but just in case there's something more that we can suss out of this, what do you think the biggest impact your happiness journey has had on you as an individual, but also on your husband and your son as well? How has your happiness journey impacted them too?
Well, I'm the voice on the podcast, but my husband's my editor. And so there's major discussions. I run ideas by him, and our son, based on proximity, is often part of the discussion. As a family, as a whole, we have become, like I said, during COVID, we're more grateful for the little things. And we try to acknowledge all the little things that we have, because I think right now they're even more important than ever. So yeah, I think it's increased our communication as a family, our focus as a family, and just, I think we're happier given the year that we just went through. It's really incredible that I think we've come out stronger than when we went into it. So that in itself is pretty cool.
Do you think you feed off each other's happiness?
Absolutely. And, and sometimes there's even a joke. It's like, no, it's your turn to be happy. I'm having a rough one. It's your turn to pull the weight. Yeah. Yeah.
And does that make a difference? Do you find then that when the other person starts to exhibit that happiness that you can't help but follow suit?
We do. I think we feed off of each other, and we've just got this. Sometimes it's even unspoken. So we throw that joke around, but sometimes it's just like, and I can say to my 13-year-old now, ooh, your energy's down today. What do you think's going on? And that's not a weird comment in this house anymore. Whereas previously it would have been like, what are you talking about?
And I was going to say, he's a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. It's just really changed the focus of how we look at the world.
It's awesome. In the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
Happiness in the middle of COVID. If anyone wants to check out Bona's podcast, head over to her website, thehappieryou.net, or you can find her anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, Bona, as we wrap up today's episode, as you get ready to pack up your OUTCAN life and head back to Canada, along with hundreds of other families in the United States, other CAF families who are getting ready to do the same thing. What are you going to miss most about the United States, and what do you think you're most looking forward to when you get back to Canada?
We will miss our friends, Canadian and American and international. We're going to miss them dearly. We're going to miss the travel, even though we haven't had that this year. And we live in this incredible place right along the Potomac River. Every day we talk about how blessed we are to live here. We'll miss the friends, the travel, and also just really where we live, the environment and the beautiful area. But we're excited to go home to friends and family. So that always helps with that transition. And I am just so excited to be able to paint the walls in my own house. Yeah. And just make something my own and put our signature on it. I'm pretty excited about that.
And eat all dressed chips whenever you want.
You know what's going to happen though? We're going to get home and we're going to be like, oh, we really missed these ones that we found to supplement when we couldn't find them. So we'll be heading back across the border to bootleg those or something.
To find new chips. Yeah. If you could leave our listeners with one thought about happiness, what would it be?
I really think, especially as military spouses, I really do believe that you have to bring your happiness with you because nobody's going to do it for you. So I think just go within and find it and figure out what makes you happy, or at least what brings you joy, or at least what can pull you out of a funk, and reach out and figure out those things. Because with all the moves that we do in our lives, it's really important to have the control over that yourself. That is one thing that you can absolutely control. So figure out how to find yours.
Bona, thank you for sharing your family's OUTCAN journey with our listeners. Your hope, your optimism, your happiness, it's infectious. And I, for one, am proud to share your happy voice of OUTCAN.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to the Voices of OUTCAN podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to hear when new episodes are released and share with other military families and their supporters. Check out our Voices of OUTCAN podcast information and all of the other resources and supports offered by MFSUS on our CAF Connection web pages at cafconnection.ca/United States. To all of our Canadian military members and your families, we thank you for your service.